This conference will now be recorded.
Let me know if you need anything. Okay, thanks. I want to start off with a song here. I played that just a communication breakdown because you're going to deal with problems from the very start, and you're going to I'm going to tell Philip something, and and I'm not clear about it, and he tells somebody else to help get this done, and it's then when you ask if it was done, they'll come back and give you 15 reasons it wasn't. I just like to kind of get how many are in long-term care now? Oh, great. And how many have you seen a nurse, CMA, or?
I'm a nurse.
Oh, okay, great. I think that gives you a real heads up and a little advantage because if you've been in long-term care, you know it's kind of hectic, especially the way it is now with the COVID. And have you guys figured whether you're on your reopening plan already?
I travel to different facilities. They're all different.
Oh, okay. Okay. Anyway, there's a lot of opportunities, and I think things change with the COVID and with the state. Yesterday, we got on a phone call, and by the 8th of September, we've got to have all our employees tested and all the residents tested again. The plan was the feds were going to send us out testing machines, strips, and a printer. There's 302 homes in Oklahoma. They sent out 288 and they have no idea where they're at. So it's going to be interesting. It's mandatory. Like in my home, one of them is in Nowata, Oklahoma. And the state said that Nowata, the county health department, and didn't see enough people. So they shut it down. So we don't have access to anything with the county. And the next closest one is Craig County, and they shut it down. And then the one in Bartlesville they're just overwhelmed with everything. So it's lots of opportunities and lots of things that you have to kind of take into advantage or you've got to think outside the box. So that's one of the things being administrator is I think there's things that you have to do, but at this point in time, I think everything changes so quickly that you just have to think outside of the box to make sure you get everybody tested. Interestingly enough, when Oklahoma made us test the residents the first time, we didn't get the results back for 7 days in our facilities. That does me absolutely no good. And so now they're requiring us since they're not involved, they're requiring us that we have to test, and we have to test and have results back within 48 hours, which it's a good thing. It's just, we've got to figure out how to do it. I'm Garrett HUXALL, and I'm a consultant pharmacist, and I have also an administrator. I work for PharmCare. It's one of the companies that we have here in Oklahoma. See now, I have no disclosures. Consulting pharmacist, are you familiar with consulting pharmacy? You know, a lot of times we come in, we don't say too much, we sit in a chair, go through your charts, and then come back and tell you what maybe you can fix and things like that. Consulting pharmacy now has, these are some of the places that it's pretty common that we practice. But if you're board certified, the two largest employers now, if you're board certified, are hospitals and the geriatric unit and insurance companies. And anybody that undergoes accreditation has to have a board certified pharmacist. This is just kind of how we went from consultant pharmacist, and the thing we're transitioning to is called a senior care pharmacist, and we do several things. Are you guys familiar with MTM, where you pull up the meds, make sure they're the right meds, giving it the right dose and that sort of thing? We do that. We look, and the average person that we do a medication review on comes in with somewhere between 21 and 28 meds. And they're from their orthopedic surgeon, they're from their urologist, and it seems like the little ladies will have 2 macrodent they've kept for 20 years, and they're going to keep it because they might need it. And so when we finish with them, they usually come back with, we hope, with somewhere between 10 and 12. So it's getting them to let loose of those is sometimes a problem. Some of the things that we're involved in, and I have a different, being a pharmacist, I think if we're not helping you with some of the problems you're having now, you need to get another one. I mean, you need to call if they're just sitting there and they're doing a chart review and they come in and they just exit with you and they're not helping you with your quality of care measures, they're not helping you with formulary management, you need to call and get somebody else in there because there's a ton of stuff that we can do. Medication therapy management, we kind of went over that. Chronic disease state management, here's something that we also do is your COPD patients are your frequent flyers usually in the nursing home. So what we can do is I went to the ER and said, well, the physicians, what do you do? What do you do when they come in and they start an albuterol nebulizer, they start them on a steroid, they give them an antibiotic, and then they send them back to us. So instead of having them be a frequent flyer and come back and send them out and then have them come back, we have PRN orders that aren't, they're PRN orders that we write, and it says albuterol nebulizer 4 times a day as needed or as directed. Then we have a Madrol dose pack and a Z pack that's ordered for that patient specifically. So if they have signs and symptoms, if they have to have 3 signs and symptoms of COPD, like a pulse ox that's lower than normal, increased cough, increased sputum, we can call the physician and start that immediately instead of taking him to the hospital. And if you have a demented patient, usually when they go to the hospital and come back, it takes about a week to 14 days before they get acclimated to their setting again. So there's a reason to do that. Also, you don't have to take them, put them in an ambulance and all that sort of thing. So those are some things that you can do. Like with seizure patients, it's pretty standard. You give 10 milligrams of Valium, and you repeat in 5 minutes if the seizure hadn't stopped. That's what they do in the emergency room. You just have a PRN IM Valium order and the Valium in your med room for that one patient. Interestingly enough, all the insurance will pay for these. And if you're giving a Madrol dose pack, here's just a little tip. You can give all of the first day at one time, all of the second day at one time, all of the third, fourth, and fifth. So you don't have to do 2 before a meal, 1 after a meal, and that sort of thing. I just give the whole dose. It doesn't inhibit the renal function as much. We can therapeutic drug monitoring, fall prevention. If you look at some of the meds that you take that have falls associated with them, we can either change them to an HS dose. You'll have to excuse me, I took an antihistamine this morning. We can change the dosing schedule where it's an HS so that if it does make them drowsy, they're in bed. But those sort of things, and they're just, if you're doing all your finger sticks and having trouble getting finished within the hour before and after, we can change some meds around like that. And so those are things that we can do pretty easily. Formulary management. If you all have skilled patients, but you also have OTCs that now we're responsible for. One of the things, if you're on Mucinex, it's 600 milligrams twice a day, and it's usually for 14 days. We can switch that, and that's about $30. We can switch that to guanfacine, 200 milligrams, 3 of them morning and evening, and it costs you $250. And if they're not doing that sort of thing for you, get rid of them. They're just, you need that because, that doesn't sound like a lot of money sometimes, but if they're a Medicaid patient, they only get $30 a month, and that's all they get. You have a little bit of money with what you can save on your formulary. So if they need a new pair of shoes or they need something else, you've got that kind of covered instead of taking that out of your operating expense. Formulary management also on your skill side, like if you're an antibiotic, say if you're using Omnicef, you're losing money on the skill side. You can use Banton, have the same coverage, and you'll make a little bit of money. And those are things that we should be doing for you right up front. We provide in-service. How many are familiar with antimicrobial or antibiotic stewardship? This is something we're going to have to deal with. This is going to be mandated by CMS right now. And if you look on the website, say of Johns Hopkins or Mayo, if you have an uncomplicated UTI, it recommends you treat it with an antibiotic for 3 days. 2 years ago, I was a 10-day guy. If you got an upper respiratory infection, I wanted to treat you for 10 days to make sure we got the kill the bug that you have. Same thing with antibiotics with UTIs or skin infection. If you go back on, and it's kind of interesting to look at those because now UTIs are 10 days, cellulitis is 7 days, upper respiratory infection is 5 days. And if you have some of the older time physicians, they don't like that. And so they get the UTI and they use macrodatin, BID times 10 or 14 days, which is really, we're going to get dinged on that. And also some of the meds that we were using, like if think of Cipro below the navel, we use Levaquin above the navel. And those are fluoroquinolones, and everybody, we've overused those, and we've got resistance being built up. And they're a great drug, but we just can't use them prophylactically or for empiric therapy. And again, CMS says that, we don't do a good job of that. They say that, we should do that, and they gave us guidelines, but we don't do it. So the surveyors are going to make sure that we're going to do that. And they're going to look at your antibiotic stewardship policy. They're going to look at how many nosocomial infections you have. They're going to look at how many overall infections you have, and you'll be graded on that. It's coming soon to a nursing home near you. Quality assurance measures. Are you guys familiar with the quality assurance? There's 4. Oklahoma, historically, Oklahoma, all we want to do is be ahead of Mississippi. Mississippi is 50th in the state in just about everything. And Oklahoma, I swear that we gauge ourselves, as long as we're 49, we're doing great. And so that's about where we're at. And reimbursement and staffing, the whole thing, that's kind of where we're sitting at. So if you look at that and you kind of think you think of Oklahoma, you don't think of a quality assurance program. We've got one in the state now that's pretty good, and it's based off UTIs, skin breakdown, weights, and antibiotic stewardship. And you get money each quarter for each one of those. And I'll just give you an example. Knowater Nursing Center is a home that I'm real familiar with. We've got 38 patients, and I should have gotten about $12,000 a quarter if I hit all 4 of those. I hit all 4 and I got $19,000, and the reason I got the increase in money is there was a lot of homes that didn't get any, and there were some that got 1 or 2, and there's no reason you shouldn't be getting those. And if your consultant pharmacist isn't helping you with your quality insurance measures, get another one. I'm telling you, this is, they'll pay for themselves. Like with antibiotic stewardship, they should be looking and making sure you're not using fluoroquinolones. They should be making sure you're using SBARs before you even call the physician and say, hey, I think Miss Jones has a UTI. You do an SBAR. Are you all familiar with SBARs? You go through and you check, and it tells you whether or not they qualify. It's just a checklist that you can go through, and it tells you whether or not they meet the criteria for an antibiotic. If they don't meet the criteria, then we can increase cranberry juice, increase fluids, do those sort of things and treat it. But you do an SBAR, you decide whether or not you need an antibiotic. Then it comes to picking an antibiotic, and you don't want to use a fluoroquinolone. You want to use amoxicillin is a good one. Amoxicillin, Cipro DS, macrodatin. And the thing about macrodatin, they say if the creatinine clearance is your kidney function is less than 30, you should use it. The manufacturer of macrodatin sued the FDA, and they got that revised to say if you have a creatinine clearance around 30, you can still use it. If it's less than 30, one of the side effects is peripheral neuropathy. which you already, if you're diabetic, you probably have a little bit of that, and it'll just make it worse. We look at and duration. So antibiotic stewardship is really made up of 5 things. It's the drug or the diagnosis, the drug, the duration, and the dosage, and whether it was effective or not. You need to answer all of those questions. And empiric therapy is not a good thing where we just call the physician and he said, oh, you know, it usually works. We'll give them Cipro BID, 500 BID for 10 days. You know, we can't do that. We shouldn't be doing that. And that's kind of where we sit with where a pharmacist can help you with the antibiotic stewardship. The other is weights. And if you've looked at weights, I don't know, do you PCC, are you guys familiar with PCC? PCC, you log in the weights and it gives you a graph. And so what I do is I look at those weights every time I'm in the facility. And if there's a big peak or they've lost a lot of weight, I want to go look at the resident, because usually that's just somebody got in a hurry or weighed them in the wrong wheelchair, weighed them without their prosthetic, or weighed them in the right wheelchair and they had, you know, a bottle of Coke in their bag or something like that. You know, most of those are errors and not true weight losses or true weight gains. So you want to look at those, and as a consultant pharmacist, I look at those and I give you a list when I leave, saying, hey, I don't think these weights are right. Can we double check them? And I'd say 99% of the time, it's a human error, or a new person is weighing, or all those kind of things. And so you just want to make sure, because that's one thing that you can get paid on. The other is skin breakdown. If you have skin breakdown in your facility, you admit somebody you have at 90 days, you're probably not going to get that bonus money, because you have to own it after 90 days. But if you heal it, if it's healed, then you're in line for the bonus. The other is UTIs. And so UTIs, we have a lot of problems with. We overtreat them. And are you guys all familiar with asymptomatic UTIs, where we used to culture and do a sensitivity with them? That's not recommended anymore. So if you do that, then that counts against you. One of the weird things about the UTI part of the 4 is if you don't culture it, it doesn't count against you. So if you had 2 UTIs and you cultured them, and then you had the third one was going to put you over your percentage, because it's based off your Casper report. Do you guys know what a Casper? Okay, they take a year's worth of data and they give you those 4 things, and you try to stay below the Casper report number that they have. So if you had 2 UTIs and 3 was your magic number, and if you didn't culture the third one, you don't have to count it on your MDS and care plan. That's kind of a tip, maybe. Medication evaluations, you know, there's 10 different antipsychotics you can use. There's 10 different blood pressure medications you can use. Sometimes, you know, they're on more meds than what they're having trouble, or, you know, they're having trouble taking. We can give you a combo med, recommend a combo med that has 2 meds in it. Or if you're crushing meds, that we can recommend, you know, the ones you can crush. One of the interesting things is Aricept 10 milligrams you can crush all day long. Aricept 23 milligram you can't crush. And that's one that the surveyors know about now, so you might kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Immunizations, we can do those, and we look at those. If they're over 65, they have a existing problem such as COPD. If you give them the double strength flu vaccine, you get points and stars on your STAR program. But if they're less than 65 and you give them the double strength flu vaccine, Medicare won't pay for it. So you want to look at that. The other way you get that is with a pneumovac. And what I do is, and I think you can do that on PCC, is plug in when they have them on there. And if not, you can go to their super bill and run that. Are you guys familiar with that? Everything that they've taken, all the procedures they've done, you can print that out. And anyway, if they've had the 23 flu vaccine, then in a year they can have the 13, Prevnar 13, or vice versa. And if you offer it and you get like 95%, then you get a free star. I mean, it's basically free. So, and that's what everybody shoots for. And that's another thing that we can help you with. George Archibald worked for CMS, and then he coined the term consultant pharmacist. And he was one of the main ones when CMS said they're going to start paying for nursing homes, people to be in nursing homes. He was the main driving force that the pharmacists had to be in there at least once a month. And in assisted livings in Oklahoma, it's every 90 days. So that was back when it started. We talked a little bit about board certification. There's 12 board certifications as a pharmacist. If you're in any kind of JCO or any kind of certification process, you have to have a board certified pharmacist. I also think, of course, I'm a little bit prejudiced. I just finished up the infection control board certification, but I think it's just a good thing. It's something that keeps you learning. You have to do 100 hours of continuing education every 7 years. And, you know, in Oklahoma, you only have to have 15 hours of continuing education every year. So I think this keeps you a little bit more current. These are things that you're doing. And if you're looking for a pharmacist, I would kind of check with and make sure they were board certified. I think there's quite a few of us in Oklahoma at this point. A fellowship, you know, it's just more education. I did it. You spend a couple of years going through it, and it kind of covers, you know, some of the things that we just talked about, the OTCs, the STAR program, antibiotic stewardship, and train the trainer and that sort of thing. And the antibiotic stewardship, I have a program called Bugs and Drugs, and if you guys want it, my email address will be up here. Just shoot me an email. And what it was Oklahoma two pharmacists that worked, they employed that worked through OU that came up with a profile of, you can train everybody from the CNAs to the CMAs to the nurses about antibiotic stewardship. They didn't get funded this year because of COVID, and what the money went to was buy the electronic gear that you can have communication with the families and things. So, but if you want a copy of that, I have it. Are you all familiar with the Beers criteria? Michael Beers was a physician that worked at an appointment at one of the universities. And the Beers criteria, he thought when it started, he picked 50 drugs that we shouldn't use in anybody 65 and older. And he thought when he wrote the paper and published it, it wasn't going to be a big thing. There wasn't going to be a lot. It was just going to be something that he could do for academia. It turned out that the Beers criteria kind of is the gold standard whether or not we can use a drug in long-term care. And every year now, the AGS, American Geriatric Society, and the American Association of Consultant Pharmacists redo the Beers criteria and add and take drugs off of. And usually the drugs that are on there are ones that we really shouldn't be using in geriatrics or the duplicate therapy, but it's all revised. And the surveyors use that kind of as a guideline also. So everybody knows what the Beers criteria is. I'm kind of prejudiced because I had a another pharmacist tell me, oh, the beers, we don't want to use that. We want to use stop and stop and start criteria. And what that really, if they tell you that, man, I would just not pay a lot of attention, because how that works is we give you the drug, and we give you the drug for 3 or 4 days. And if it works and you don't have side effects, they can stop, start, you can continue it. And so we expose them to the drug, even though we know it probably has side effects. One of the things with Beer's criteria is that we use a lot of the meds for the side effects. If you, Periactin is one of the antihistamines. It's an old antihistamine, but we don't use it for an antihistamine. We use it as an appetite stimulant. And amitriptyline, we don't use it usually for depression. We use it either for pain management or sleep or neuropathy, those sort of things. So you have to make a judgment whether or not, the side effects are worth giving them a med, and there's always alternatives to most of the drugs. Are you guys familiar with Smalley's Law? This was passed last year, and what happened was the Board of Pharmacy got with the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority and said, only a pharmacist or an RN can mix lidocaine and Rocephin together and give the injection. Well, you know how that works. It's never during 8 to 5 that they need the Rocephin injection, and usually the RN has gone home. So they said an LPN could do that, which, and they can give the injection. And anyway, this takes care of that. And we should have done this 20 years ago. But that was something that was a real political thing, and it just went it's been into effect about a year. We're going to talk a little bit about medical marijuana. Do any of you in your facilities you're at have a policy? Any of them? Okay. I know of 2 that kind of have a general policy. Now, here's the scoop on this. There's a bill before in the House of Representatives that's going to be heard, and they say in 90 days. I don't know how this works. This is just what they're saying. To make marijuana no longer a Schedule 1. Schedule 1 drug means there's no medical use at all, and it's just has a high potential for abuse. And that's why we don't use it in nursing homes, is because it's a Schedule 1, it's a federally Scheduled 1 drug, and that could affect your funding from Medicaid and Medicare. So if this is true, and if they do pass it, it passes the Senate, and it's signed into law, I think you're going to be dealing with this a whole lot more than what we think of. The 2 that I know about that I've helped with the policy. One is a gentleman, he was having trouble with weight loss. We tried Remeron, Periactin, all the things that we could think of. The family brings in the brownie twice a day and gives it to him. And we had to, we wrote it up as a policy and said that, they would bring in the brownie, he would self-administer it, and we do that twice a day. Well, he had a bib on, and when he would eat the brownie, there would always be crumbs and things like that. Believe it or not, we had a couple of CNAs that were picking the crumbs off his bib and eating them. And so you don't ever want to, I wouldn't have thought of that. So you guys kind of keep that in mind. The other one is a lady is in a long-term care resident, and she was anxious, and we took her off the antipsychotics, and she was taking the gummy bears. Anyway, we had to have a lockbox in the facility that only she had the key to, and the family stocked it. We didn't stock it. We didn't keep track of it. We did care plan it, but she decided that she was having some pain in her lower legs, and so the family brought in some THC cream, And she would eat the gummy and rub the THC cream. And she was getting, it was not therapeutic. Well, maybe it was therapeutic, but anyway, she was hot and she was having trouble with falling. And so we had to give her a choice, and she was not happy. And when they sat down in the care plan, I happened to be there, and we were going through the things that, she was falling, she might break a hip, all that sort of stuff. All she kept saying was, I like to be high. This is an 82-year-old lady. And so I think there's a lot more of that going on. And anything that has to do with medical marijuana, it doesn't have anything to do with whether it's effective or not. It's about money. You just wouldn't believe the amount of money this would generate if they did that nationwide. February of 2019, Oklahoma made medical marijuana legal in Oklahoma. We lost our executive director of the State Board of Pharmacy over that. I don't know if it made the paper. She made some kind of comment that if they would make sure that a pharmacist was involved in it, that she would hire the attorney that worked for the Department of Justice or something here in Oklahoma. I think it was in jest, but anyway, she lost her job over that. Again, Oklahoma, we're just not a progressive state. We didn't go to Colorado and say, tell us what worked. Tell us how, some pitfalls that we can avoid, or California or someplace that had it in place. We started from the very scratch and decided we could do it better. We did. So 33 states have legalized marijuana. Again, if the bill goes through the House, then recreational marijuana will be legal in all 50 states. Here's some things that are still illegal, even if you have a card. You can't get marijuana by prescription, and you can't buy from a non-licensed dispensary. So the guy on the street that the Ziploc bags, they roll up, that sort of stuff, those are usually illegal. You can't use in the workplace. You can't cross state lines with a card in Oklahoma. Anything that involves smoking, like cigarettes, if it says you can't smoke within 50 feet of the building or something like that, that applies to marijuana also. You can't give it away. That's illegal. You can't buy it with a credit card. And driving while impaired, you're not supposed to do that. And possessing more than what you're supposed to. In Oklahoma, what we did was we left it up to the county. It's kind of like prohibition. I don't know, I've not looked into this, but like in Ottawa County, you might be able to have 4 ounces, and in Craig County, you might be able to have 2 ounces. So you have to be kind of careful about that. Each county has the option of making their own amounts. The risk areas, if you're going to use it in a nursing home and storing it, and we put an actual lockbox in her closet with the little lady. The administration was up to her. We had to intervene on that. We took away the gel or the cream. She wanted the gummies worse than the cream. We had a care plan, and the side effects we documented and that we went over them just like with any man. Mobility devices, don't think about this, but those little carts that they drive around, the halls are not real big. And if they've had 1 or 2 gummies too many, you can run over somebody, or somebody on crutches or a walker wasn't going fast enough, you might take them. And then the other part is theft. And so you don't want to be any part of that, or your employees don't. Best practices, you update a care plan, you go over it just like you would any drug. You develop policies and procedures, what instrument to use, how to use it, that sort of thing. You inform the residents and their families. And if it's a new resident and you don't have a policy for it, then you need to let them know upon admission. If you do, you need to share the policy with them. The policy I have is from a home in New York that is pretty open about using it. It was developed and it has their surveyors. I don't know if it would work here or not. It's just kind of generic. You have to have proof of your registered cards and you need to educate your staff. The dumps, I don't know, are you guys familiar with, one of the things that Oklahoma thought was such a good idea is say, I wanted to smoke marijuana, but I was housebound, I couldn't get out. And I called Blake and he could get a card that he could get my pot and bring it to me. Well, you know, if you're doing that, you got, you know, if Blake buys 2 ounces, I get 1.5 ounces. And then they come to you, well, that's abuse, financial abuse, and you're going to have to turn that in. So you don't want any of that going on, even in the best intentions, I wouldn't have that. But you can get a card like that, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think $150 is what a card costs. And I think just to be the transportation or the carrier is $25. But you get a card and you still have to go the background check. If you're going to store it, you have to make sure you have a policy that you're going to keep it locked and out of the way. And the general rule is if you've got an Alzheimer's patient that wanders around and in the room, can they get in the room? It's kind of like an OTC med that they keep at bedside. You want to kind of go through those guidelines. If they have a card, marijuana is not an ADA issue. Most of the time we find out when this happens is if your facility has a policy that says you can't smoke marijuana, then that's where even a card doesn't help that. One of the things that's kind of interesting in the cerebral spinal fluid, once you smoke one joint, they can detect that for up to 3 to 6 months. Now, if you ingest it, it's about the same, but then, you know, I'm not going to have somebody draw some cerebral spinal fluid to check for pot. So if you're if you're doing a UA, that sort of thing, it's about 7 days, and that's about as most we can get. And they check for active metabolites. Okay, do you have anybody that in your facilities that use CBD oil? The state said that you don't have to get that from a dispensary. You can get that wherever they sell it, and you can treat it as an OTC. And we have a couple of people that use that. CBD oil, there's 2 receptors, THC1, THC2. THC1 is the CBD oil, and it doesn't have a lot of psychoactive effects. CBD2 does, and so that's the live THC. I was kind of interested. They didn't address CBD oil in the marijuana policy with the state. Oklahoma Healthcare Authority made it an OTC where you can keep it in the facility. Okay. The Department of Health established the Oklahoma Marijuana Authority. And if you want, it's kind of interesting some of the things that they went through to do this. And they're always evolving. It used to be when they first came out, if you had a conceal and carry, you couldn't have a marijuana card. And I guess last year they said that's discrimination. Or anyway, it went to court. Now you can have a pot or a marijuana card and a conceal and carry. But I think the conceal and carry, you don't even have to have one of those now to carry a gun. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, it's kind of interesting to go through that, and they're updating this policy. Some of the things that we've seen with the marijuana has been interesting because I have a clinic that I work in, excuse me, and one of the things was they came in and said, you know, I'm taking a lot of Lortab and I want to get off of it, I think the pot will help. You could always check and see how many Lortab they were taking. Excuse me. Through the OSBI website, but there was no way to say how much pot they were smoking. So you're really taking their word for it. And it seems we've had some pretty good luck with it, if they're telling us the truth. I mean, if they're saying they're only smoking a couple of joints a day or whatever, and not taking, you can count the Lortab and they seem to be true. The law, the counties have it, it's kind of like prohibition. So if you've got a card, be careful. Marijuana, as far as we're concerned in the long-term care, we're going to treat it like any other scheduled drug. Have it locked up. It's not FDA approved, and there's not a pharmacy or pharmacist involved in it. I went to a place that I don't know where they grow. They have lots of plants anyway, and they have people. This was just amazing to me. They have people that trim the buds. And just trim it to get the pot to sell in the dispensaries. And I was just amazed that, these people they were bringing them these plants and they weren't pulling the leaves off or anything. They were just trimming the buds. And when they do that, man, that is potent stuff. Okay, here's what in the general rules is you can have 3 ounces of marijuana in one person. You can have up to 6 mature plants, and you can have 6 seedling plants. I don't know what the difference in that is, but you can have 6 mature or 6 seedling plants. You can have a concentrated marijuana, or my favorite, 72 ounces of edibles, and up to 8 ounces of marijuana in your residence. And that's just been revised. 72 ounces sounds like a lot. The edibles would be the gummy bears and things like that. So you can have, that's 5 pounds, isn't it?
Gummy bears can be.
Yeah. If somebody tests positive for marijuana and they have a drug, it's not considered a positive test, but it's the company policy. That's what you have to go off. It says you can't smoke it or you can't be around it, and you can still dismiss them for the positive test. The restrictions, vaping is one of those things we don't know a lot about. We know it's hard on the lungs. We know you probably shouldn't do it, and people react differently. And what it does when you vape, there's alveoli in your lungs that exchange the oxygen. It causes them to make a mucus type product. And so when the mucus starts to cover the alveoli, you don't get as much oxygen exchange. And we know that happens with cigarettes, and we know it happens with vaping, but we don't have a lot of long-term studies. And they also, have any of you been to Vegas lately or in the last year? You get off the plane and there's a shop, like a pot shop, I guess, and all they sell is the vapes. I mean, you go in, I went in just to see what was going on, but they ask you, whether you want to party all night or whether you want to, drink or whatever, and they pick your strain of pod that they put in this vapor, and this little cartridge, and you get it that way. I was just amazed. I mean, it's it's just pretty neat. So we don't know a lot about vaping. We know it's not good for you, and that seems to be one of the things that vaping delivers a more concentrated form. We're talking about pharmacy now with picking your pharmacy provider. Oklahoma is real big in this, that they have the freedom of choice. They can get their meds anywhere they want. The caveat on that is they can get their meds anywhere they want, except as long as they provide them. If you're carting the meds, they have to cart them. If you're blister packing them, they have to be blister packed. So technically, you do have freedom of choice. Now, that doesn't include the VA or the Indian Health Service. They're going to do whatever they want. You're not going to make any changes there. And those are the only caveats. That's not as big a deal as what it once was. You have to log in the medications. We have to provide you logs and delivery of medications. You don't want to have the same person ordering the meds that checks the meds in. There was a case before the Board of Pharmacy, and the tech worked in long-term care. Anyway, this was before Lortab was a Schedule II. And so she would order it on a PRN card, and then she would order it on a routine card. And she was ordering it, and then when it came in, she only counted in the routine, and then she took all the paperwork for the PRN 60 and took them. And anyway, she got caught. And interestingly enough, a lot of the folks that we catch with narcotics, and this is going to be a problem you're going to have to deal with, are not taking it themselves. They're getting it for, their boyfriend. I've never had a guy get it for a girlfriend that I know about, but I've had quite a few nurses, CMAs get it, and they got caught giving it to the boyfriend. In Oklahoma, you can't return meds. I'm sure you all know that. So if you get a med that is for the wrong patient or the wrong med, we're just going to ask you to destroy it with the nurse and the pharmacist. Again, these are some of the places that you can find a consultant pharmacist. One of the interesting things, they're putting pharmacists also in the ER of the hospital. To kind of go through their meds and see what, if they could have been an interaction, the reason they're in there. Okay, if you're choosing one, a good way is if you have a friend or somebody that's in a nursing home, that's an administrator, or deals with another consulting group or something like that, just ask them, did they do a good job? As far as, I've hired a couple of pharmacists that couldn't go in a home without making them mad. I mean, and it's just how you phrase it, or you tell them, you need to do this, and you want to make sure you don't want to get one of those guys or girls. That's really tough. Most of the pharmacists are with a pharmacy. The consulting is attached to a dispensing pharmacy. I think there's only one independent left in Oklahoma that does it, and she contracts mostly with one of the owners that owns the pharmacy. But that's about all I know about. I don't know if you guys use an independent or something like that. There's some in the assisted living that they only have to be there every 90 days. You have to be able to work with them. And we used to, when you had a survey, we would show up and kind of help you gather stuff, whatever the surveyor was needing. In Arkansas, about 10 years ago, they did away with that. They kind of did a lockdown, and you didn't have any of your folks that could come in and, ask them what they needed, help them get it, or that sort of thing. And that's kind of the way it is now in Oklahoma. As a consultant pharmacist, very few times do you get help with the surveys, which I kind of like to, because there's a lot of stuff going on that maybe you could give them the information that they normally wouldn't ask for. But We just don't do that much anymore. We're always available by phone, and you can call and we'd be happy to talk to the servers. I don't know anybody that does a lot of, survey at a time. Again, the required visit in long-term care is every 30 days. One of the interesting things, the way the law was written in Oklahoma was we had to be physically in the facility. And with the COVID, they made some kind of exception that, we could, and if we can log into your PCC or Omega Care or Matrix, we can get all the information we need. We just don't have the face-to-face time, to explain new things or that are coming down the pipe or something like that. But they made an exception where you could do it online, do your consulting online. And it still has to be within a 30-day period. Also with the assisted living, they did the same thing, and it's every 90. As you know, with this COVID thing, things change almost on a weekly basis. And so I don't know, the policy procedures are just really hard to keep up with. One of the things that we can do and that we're really good at is formulary management, where we can save you some money on the OTCs and things like that. And that's something we need to be doing, because most of the facilities, when we started doing this, use that money that they save on OTCs for stuff for the residents. I mean, if they need to. One told me that the lady got new underwear, and that's how they paid for it. And I really believe this: if you have your consultant, shouldn't cost you any money, and they should save you a little bit of money, and by what they're doing, directing meds, helping you with your OTCs, helping you with your antibiotic stewardship, and things like that. One of the nice things about the antibiotic stewardship is most of the drugs that we recommend are older drugs that have a great safety profile, that they're real inexpensive. But you need to kind of keep in mind, are you all familiar, diabetic? Anyway, metformin is a drug that's been around forever. Well, the drug companies now have decided that they'll make it long acting because sometimes it upsets your tummy. Now, I can get you, it's on the $4 list at Walmart, metformin 500 twice a day, 60 of them you get for $4. The drug companies have come out with these time release metformin that you still take twice a day, but it's just time release. They're $10,000 a month. So your insurance companies aren't going to pay for that. And you would be surprised. They've got a new hypnotic out that is a melatonin derivative that's $600 a capsule. So you're going to see that. You're going to have to deal with it, because there'll be a few that they'll either get it prior authorized or something. But it's unbelievable now that the amount of money that the metformin and these single migraine, Utolic, or there's one out that's in a single package, and there's another one that's advertised on TV. Those things are $200 a tab, and and the way that works is the salesman for the drug go to the physician's office and give them 15 or 20 of them. And then when they want it fulfilled, then the insurance company says, is this a continuation of therapy? And if you check yes, you might get it. These are just some of the things we kind of, we go through. We watch med passes. We do review the orders, make sure they're up to date. We destroy meds. We do in services, that sort of thing. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. We go through the med department, pull expired meds, improper storage. The council No, and it has to be set up straight in a med card. It can't be lit, it can't be lit or on the side. We audit control substances. As an administrator, if I were you, what I do is one day a week, I pick a cart and I go look at the scheduled meds. And I don't look at all of them. I look at 5 or 6 and I take the, the count sheet and just pick 5 or 6 of them and make sure my count is correct. And that'll head off a lot of problems. And also, once you're doing that, they know you're going to check. They'll be a lot more careful. Because if you've ever, I know when they count those meds out between shifts, if you've ever watched them do that, they don't say the names. They just go through and say, Lortab 538, Ambien 521. And so if they're out of order or something, you can have an error. But that's just something I would do. You don't have to do the same med cart and just pick 3 or 4 and do it. And that's the way the surveyors are doing it now also. Now, are you guys familiar with Neurontin? Neurontin in Oklahoma, we've got it before the Board of Pharmacy now that it's going to be scheduled. And so that's going to be another counter. And it does seem to have some abuse potential, especially if you have it with a narcotic. And you can go online, it's called Thunder Road something. And this guy tells you, how many to take and to get a high, and you can't take them for 2 weeks because you build up a tolerance, all this kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting. It's more than, the side effects and things like that are more than what they publish in the package inserts. Med destruction, you have to have the DON and the consultant pharmacist. You can have help and in that. One of the things though is the charitable pharmacies. Are you all familiar with recycling? I tell you, we need to do that. In Tulsa, we have Tulsa County, and I think in Oklahoma City, you have Oklahoma County Pharmacy that you can live for. In Tulsa County, we've been open 12 years. We've done $36 million worth of meds that we've recycled. And those meds, if they use a recycled med, they're free to the population. It's just a great thing. Tulsa also has, if you were, say, driving through and your child ran out of dilantin or something like that, we can give you enough to get to wherever you're going, which is kind of nice because under the purview of Tulsa County, I don't know about Oklahoma City, but under their purview, you have to be a Tulsa County resident to get the free. Lovenox we had so much Lovenox, we told the physicians that we would fill Lovenox for anybody. And, they come out in Lovenox for a couple days or 3 days after surgery. One of the things you want to make sure is that we're doing drug destruction. You don't want it to pile up, especially if you have changes with your DON. You want to have it done as quickly as possible. Next time the consultant's in, you just want to make sure and get all your drugs destroyed. If something's going to show up short or something like that, then we're probably within a time period that we can still do something about it. These are just some of the things that we do. If there's duplicate therapy, you'd be surprised how many people are taking lisinopril and Vasotec. It's 2 ACEs that are used for blood pressure. I like lisinopril because it's just once a day dosing, and you get a better, I think you get a better under the curve make sure you aren't crushing long acting or, with the K-tab that you're dissolving it, that sort of thing. The IV meds, we have them in stock and they're using proper technique. One of the things also, if you start somebody on a routine narcotic such as Lortab or something like that, make sure that you start them on a stimulant laxative and a stool softener, because 95% of them will get constipated if you don't. Allergic reactions. This has kind of been I had some experience with this. One of our residents went to the hospital to have surgery. And anyway, when she came out of surgery and they were getting ready to bring her back, she was real anxious. And so the daughter asked for Ativan. And anyway, they gave her Ativan. It's about a 30-minute ride to our facility from the hospital. And when we got her, she was absolutely crazy. And the daughter, we weren't going to give her anything to calm her down until we figured out what was going on. Turns out she was allergic to Ativan, and it took about 4 hours for that wear off. And then we gave her some Benadryl and kind of calmed her down. But man, allergic reactions also, just because they've had a med doesn't mean they're not allergic to it. We had a guy that's a BA that was a diabetic and had some ulcers on his feet, and we were doing it. He was on vancomycin probably 3 or 4 times during that 6-month period. He went in before we had our Z-Pack and Medrol dose pack therapy. He went back to the VA and they started him on vanco, and he had an anaphylactic shock. So don't rule that out just because they've not had one. And we have to be doing that with everything on, if there's less expensive alternatives. We have drug interactions, and those, are you guys familiar? When we fill a script, we have everything that you called into us, and this is why you want to use one pharmacy. This is one of the things. We have every drug that you've ever taken, and then we added whatever the new drug is, or when we refill it, and that program automatically runs a drug or drug food check. And so if there's a problem, then we get a hold of you. That's something that needs to be done pretty routinely. I think everybody uses computer generated reports and laboratory testing. I know in PCC you can download your labs and that sort of thing. You know how long I can talk forever if you guys want to take a break, or if
It
you.
shows a break at 10.
Pardon?
It shows a break at 10.
Oh, okay. Okay. Will you tell me when 10 is? Okay. The laboratory testing you can download, and that's really handy if you're doing your medication review from online, and you log in and you can have access to your labs. Or if you're wanting to make a dosage change and you need to know what the creatinine clearance is so that you can figure it, you can download that. That's pretty standard, I think. Okay. I wanted to kind of go over this. If you have a Medicare skilled resident and they go to the hospital and you're in a smaller town, say no one, and they go to the hospital, they don't stock by stalling. So they'll call and say, can you send that over? Technically, you should say, no, you need to get that. But that's not what happens in real life. We send them the by-stallic and then they send it back. But you see that a lot in the rural hospitals because of their limited formulary. The surveyors have not said anything about that. The patient signs, on the admission, you ask if they want to donate their meds, either that have been discontinued or a time of death. And most everybody signs those. And controls doesn't say can be recycled. When a patient passes, don't give the meds to the family. This was an interesting story. Oklahoma, we were not giving the meds not giving the narcotics to the families. They got in, anyway, the DEA got involved, and the DEA came up from Dallas. And what they told us was, no matter what the meds are, you can give them to the responsible party. And, I've got another fly doctor, but if they're Lortab and Xanax, you know, the responsible party might be in Florida coming up to get us. So I wouldn't, and they've not said anything to us after they made that initial ruling. It wasn't something that they published, so we didn't take it as gold, and we're not doing that. I mean, I don't think anybody's doing that. Okay, now if a patient discharges from your facility, there's a tag in the Oklahoma book L847 that says those meds are the patient's, and if the patient's going home, you have to send all the meds home. And the reason that came up was we had a little gentleman that was in a smaller town that was in skilled. He broke his hip, he came in, he was on Lortab 10 and Xanax 0.5, and he was on it routinely, so he had quite a few of them. So he got ready to discharge. The family was known to the town. I mean, it was like 3,000 people maybe. Anyway, they knew the family. His son had a Lortab and Xanax habit. So they thought they were doing the right thing by not sending that home. They called the state, the ombudsman got involved. The surveyors came out and wrote a deficiency under L847. That's the only time I've ever seen that written. I didn't even, so you have to give them, even if you think they're going to be diverted, you, by law, if you're discharging him and they're for the patient and he discharges, you have to give him a med. There's some qualifications on when you're recycling. It can't be a controlled substance. It has to have at least 45 days dating on it. You can't have it resold or donated to any pharmacy. In Tulsa, when we get the injectable, like in Vega, Risperdal and that sort of thing, we have a Children's Family Services that we donate those to. Those are unbelievably, they're like $3,000 an injection. I would send. You must have it if you're running a free clinic. It must be under the control of a health professional. Health professional in Oklahoma is defined either as a nurse, a pharmacist, or a physician, or a PA. I think a nurse practitioner too. The thing to remember is you've got right of privacy and HIPAA and all that, so you just use a magic marker and knock out the name, and everything else stays on there. And then your recycling meds and sheets that you write down what you recycled of things have to be kept in the nursing home for 2 years. And then the transportation is in Tulsa, the physicians pick up the meds and take them to the farms or take them to the Tulsa County. There's also, I think, a Baptist organization that goes around and picks them up, and they give you good records. The ones that are legitimate will always know that you have to have those recycling information, and they'll help you fill it out. And again, when you're ordering a prescription, just make sure the same person doesn't order and check in the med at no auto during the day shift. That CMA orders the meds, and then the CMA at night checks them in. And those are done electronically. You can just scan them, so it's very quick. Emergency kits are in Oklahoma, again, we're one of the few states that said you couldn't have an emergency kit. And then we said you could have an emergency kit, and it contained a respiratory stimulant, a cardiac stimulant, Benadryl, and Dilantin. Well, Benadryl's on back order. Dilantin they don't make anymore. So you can have a cardiac stimulant and a respiratory stimulant. Then we got the law passed that you can have You can't have any narcotics, but you can have like Cipro, you can have Cipro DS, you can have Lasix, all those sort of things that are routine. You can have those. And what we were doing was we were putting those in a tackle box and putting a little tie around it. So when you used it, you would break the tie right on what you use, and then the next time we bring you a whole new tackle box out, pick up that. Well, the state board said that if we picked it up, that was returning meds, so we just had to destroy it. So what happened was we got a law passed, and we have lock boxes now, and at Farm Care, you get a lock box, and when you want, say you need 3 Cipro DS, you call in the pharmacy, we get online, you have the box that's in your bedroom or someplace that's secure, it's to the wall or mounted to the wall, and we can type in and release 3 Cipro, 3 Lasix, whatever you need, and then it automatically counts back so that, you know, we dispense 3 for Betty Jones, and, you know, it's a 7 days, so we would send you the rest of them for 7 days. It's pretty neat. It's a pretty neat process. Again, every other state in the nation, you can have narcotics, you can have whatever you want in there, and Oklahoma said no. One of the things, the reason that happens, in my opinion, is that on the Board of Pharmacy, they're all retail pharmacists. And so they don't deal with this. And they look at consulting pharmacies or nursing home pharmacies as competition. And so this is one way they can kind of keep their foot in the door. They say they're closer, you know, they can make a quicker delivery. You know, we have drivers and we can get at 100 miles within 2 hours. So, and that's well within the limit with the state. Yeah, nurse, PA, or doctor. We have, and if you just let us know if you run out of something, and we come and either consult it or restock it, or if we have a tank that goes around and restocks the meds. Okay. You want to take a break now? Well, okay. So why do you guys want to be a nursing home administrator?
Why?
Yeah.
I want to see things done better, personally.
I just, you know,
Out of order.
it's just one of those things, there's so many things changing now, and you're held accountable for so many things, like the $1,200, you know, that we got.
Yeah.
You know, if they deposit it in their account, the Attorney General said now that you, even if they owe you money, you can't do anything with that. Even if they sign a release that says you can't, you know, those things like that change all the time. And it just seems, I like the administrator part of it.
Yeah.
But it's just, you know, you've got your ombudsman that, you know, they can call and then they can turn you, you know, they can just call the hotline and say, you know, Blake took my $100 and hang up. And then they trace the call back and you'll see the survey. It's a real, it can be one of the most rewarding things you ever do. But, and it can be, it's just unbelievable the things that folks think about. Like, I don't know, I mean, I never thought about taking the crumbs off
That's crazy.
guys. You know, I was thinking about that. I probably wouldn't even have thought to put a bib on, you know. I should have, when they said they were using bibs, I should have, and that's one of the things I do now, but if they're using bibs, I go check because I figure they're catching the crowns and somebody's having some fun.
They're not gonna get away with it.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Chrome's really, yeah.
but, and since Lord has the Schedule 2, it's, it's a lot harder to get, we use a lot of Tylenol 3 now because you can call it in. Tylenol 3 is a real dirty drug. I mean, it's got a lot of side effects.
Yeah.
So. How about you?
The cranberry juice. The cranberry juice, talk about earlier. The cranberry juice, we talked about earlier. What is the rationale? And instead of giving the water, we give the cranberry juice in the case of UTI.
The cranberry juice, if it's natural, and if it's synthetic, and same thing with vitamin C, it increases the urine pH and kills the bacteria. But if it's synthetic,
Synthetic,
it doesn't work.
I was looking at it, and I said, well, if you take a cranberry juice, I said, filter, the kidney has a filter in it. So does it go through and trap the bacteria, or what is it? And then they try the UTI around. But then I said, well, why not we give the person water? I will also have to flush the kidney and
We used to have, there's a group of men that does the same thing. We found, in your bladders where everything's being stored. And we create that. Clear. Bacteria.
Yeah.
some of the drugs that are
This time.
the resident, some medication are necessary given the residents over 65 years. Okay, and some are drugs. Is that part of that?
You did. Now soften the protein like that. Usually it's like antibiotics, other meds that we used 10 years ago that we've got something better for. And like if you kind of quickly and trazodone, I think I said, if you take